I think we're ready to go. Good morning or afternoon, depending on when you're watching this video. I hope you're staying warm in the snow and not having too much fun out there. Today we're going to be watching a presentation on classification. So if you've printed off the fill in the blank notes, go ahead and get those out. If not, they are located on It's Learning, so please pause and print that off for you. We're going to go ahead and get started. So basically there are 1.7 million species currently named and described on this planet, in the world, and they're believed to be millions more discovered. Think about all the area of the world that we have not discovered and the microscopic organisms. So we have to answer the question, how can we organize these different things? And we do this through taxonomy, which is the practice of naming and classifying organisms. And we've already talked about the scientist who actually came up with this process. He came up with a classification system called binomial nomenclature, which means two names, the bi, and then nomial means names, naming system. So every living thing that has been classified under this organism has a unique two-part name, and we get it from the genus and species level of classification, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. This is just a little funny cartoon. Most of the naming system uses the language Latin, so I know some of you are in Latin, so maybe you can see some words that are familiar to you. However, Latin is a dead language and is also known as is used in the universal binomial nomenclature naming system. What's really important from this slide is how you write the two-name scientific name. The genus is always capitalized. That the species is not. It's always put in italics if you're typing it, or if you're writing it, you always have to underline it. So notice the underlining in the cartoon beside. Alright, so when I was actually your age, there was only 6 kingdoms, and recently they've actually added another level of organization, which is domains. So there are 3 different types of domains, and the 6 kingdoms that we'll talk about. So the 3 domains are the bacteria, which are unicellular and prokaryotic cells. The second domain is archaea, archaea, which are unicellular and prokaryotic cells. Cells do not have peptidoglycan in their walls. And then you have the eukarya, which are basically all the eukaryotic organisms. So the kingdoms that fall under these domains is the bacteria domain. You have the eubacteria. The archaea domain, you have the archaea bacteria. And then the eukarya domain is basically all the rest, the protists, the plants, the fungi, and the animals. And we're going to talk about kingdoms and domains, an entire unit, after we finish evolution. So here is the classification system that he came up with. Over here you see domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species, and that's what you should be writing down in your notes. So the 8 levels of classification, which we just talked about last slide. The first one, the broadest one, is domain, and there are 3 domains, again, bacteria, archaea, and the eukarya. Then you have your 6 kingdoms. You saw these as well as the previous slide, but you have the eubacteria, the archaea bacteria, then you have the protista, the fungi, the plant and animal kingdoms. Then you have the phylum, so we're moving down from the broad to most specific, so phylum is next. And you have about 20 groups of different phylum. An example of a phylum would be the Chordata group. Then you have class, which is Mammalia or Reptalia, so we're getting lower. Then you have order. An example with this would be Carnivora. Then you have family, genus, species. So to get the specific two-name system or scientific name for organism, we're looking at these 2 levels. Remember, this one is capitalized, this one is not, and they're both italicized or underlined. So kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. Here's just one example of the cheetah, as we know it, but the scientific name for the cheetah would be Pantharia pardus, which we get it from the genus, and the species name is Pardus. But you can see the kingdom, and we can take it one step further. The domain would be Eukarya, Chordata, Mammalia, Carnivora, Felidae, Pantheria. Pantheria pardus is the species name. So this is how we have classified organisms. Alright, so all of the animals in order taxon have many other taxa in common. So you can see the similarities between organisms, how they're classified in the system based on which kingdom they fall into, going from the most broadest to most specific. So you can see we've classified the grizzly bear. So the genus and species is down here, the scientific name. But look, one level up, you're going to have more species. So under the genus Ursus, you have the black bear and the grizzly bear. Under this family, you have the panda, black bear, grizzly bear. Under the order, you have a dog, a panda, black bear, grizzly bear. So each level gets broader and broader. So that's why you have to have this many levels of classification to classify species. So I believe that you have this chart in your notes that you need to fill out the blanks. I'm not sure which ones are the blanks that you have in front of you, so just fill them out. But you can see different similarities and differences between these 5 species. So you have a human, a chimpanzee, a house cat, a lion, and a horsefly. All of them fall within the kingdom Animalia. 4 out of the 5 fall under the chordate phylum. Same thing with the class. 4 out of the 5 are mammals. Look at the horsefly. It's going off on its own direction, so we can eliminate the horsefly as being, very similar to some of these other species. So you can just kind of play with this chart to look. The closer related they are, the more they get, or the further down they get in the levels of classification. Note again down here you have the genus and species name to come up with a scientific name. The first word, the genus, is capitalized. The second word is not, and it's italicized. This is really important. Alright, so now we have this organization system, but how do we put organisms into it? So how do scientists classify? So in addition to structure and appearance and behavior, other aspects that we consider when classifying is DNA. So we just left the DNA unit, and they can use all those biotechnology tools to look at the evolutionary relationships between the different species. Another one is the other one is the phylogeny, which is the ancestral relationship between species, which is what we're going to be looking at in the cladistics part, which is you're going to be creating your own cladogram. So this is the method to infer the phynology ancestry based on comparison of shared characteristics. So here is an example of how DNA is helped with the classification system. So hopefully you know by now that there is a variation among a population. Sometimes it's caused by a mutation, and over time, if that mutation gives an advantage for an organism to survive, then eventually you can create a new species. So for example, we have 3 birds here, and if I just showed you the picture, which bird do you think is more closely related to the other? Hopefully you would say the 2 vulture-looking birds are closer related, but actually scientists have analyzed their DNA, and what they found out is that that the storks and the American vulture share some behavior instincts, which is it will urinate on its legs, so the evaporative cooling actually removes body heat, and storks do this as well. So obviously we just saw the picture. Storks do not look like vultures and have never been put in the same family, but because of DNA sequencing, it's shown that American vultures are more closely related to storks than other vultures. So we also have to come into consideration of DNA. Alright, so this is the big task for the day, is you're going to be learning how to draw your own cladogram, and this is what you're going to be doing later this week, whether we're in school or you're at home. So this is called a cladogram, and there are different steps on how to create a cladogram, and it shows the ancestry and relationship between different organisms. So the first thing you have to do is create a chart. So you'll see that we're going to draw our own cladogram using these 4 organisms. So a moss, fern, pine tree, and a flowery plant. You have to come up with a common relationship between these plants. So we're going to be looking at the vascular tissue, seeds, and flowers. So you're going to fill out this chart. That's number 1. So a moss. Does moss have vascular tissue? No. Seeds? No. No flowers. Same thing. You're going to go down. Fern. Fern has vascular tissue, no seeds, no flowers. Pine trees has vascular tissues, has seeds, but no flowers, and the flowering plant has all 3. So once you figure out the characteristics for each of the organisms and you set up your chart, you can set up a cladogram. So you're going to start at one point and you're going to draw the connecting line. And basically what you do to read the cladogram is that you're going to put your finger or your pencil at the bottom, and every trait that it crosses to get to the picture, that means that organism has that trait. So if we go straight up, mosses don't have hardened vascular tissue, seeds, or flowers. Starting back over, if I cross vascular tissue, ferns have vascular tissues, but no seeds, no flowers. If we go all the way to the flowering plant, you can see that I'm crossing all 3 traits. That means the flowering plants have flowers, seeds, and vascular tissue. And based on the chart from the previous slide, that is true. So here's another group, or example of a cladogram. Each group is called a clade. I think this is at the bottom of your notes. And they're grouped based on these derived characteristics, which are shared characteristics. So these are these little hashtags down here that show characteristics for these organisms. So let's just do one more. Let's look at the lizard. So a lizard has jaws, they have lungs, they have claws or nails, and that brings us to the lizard. So they do not have feathers, which I would hope you would know that. Fur or mammary glands. So you can see how this cladogram can organize the relationships between organisms based on their shared characteristics. So there's different ways to draw cladograms, but if you always follow that rule that you start at the bottom, whatever your pencil crosses as you get up to it, it's going to help you understand how to create cladograms and read them as well. Now this is a website that we're actually going to go to. I'm going to try to click it on here to see what happens. You are going to go through this website on your own, but I'll upload specific instructions for this assignment as well, and I will upload the link to it as well. Oops. Okay. And that's it. We will talk about dichotomous keys if we're out of school tomorrow. Be looking for that lecture next. Hope everyone's staying warm.